controversy that erupted at the CPAC convention this past Friday. Panel discussion on how Republicans could overcome their issues with race and tolerance quickly spun out of control when a member of the audience, Scott Terry, seemed to suggest that slavery had been a good thing and that young Southern white males were being disenfranchised in America. Take a look.
When Douglas escaped from slavery, I think 10 years or 20 years after he escaped from slavery, he writes a letter to his former slave master and says, I forgive you for all the things you did to me.
Forgiving him with shelter, food, all those
things? No. Listen, wait back now. Wait now.
One of the members of that audience was Kim Brown, host of for the Voice of Russia, and she joins me now in studio to talk more about what happened Friday. Her show, by the way, The Kim Brown Show, the website, thekimbrownshow.com. I want to, you do a great job. I want to give you a plug. Great to have you with us, Kim.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you for having me.
So what's your sense of what happened?
At this particular panel?
Yes.
There was a number of things going on. I kind of categorize it as like a tri-conflagration of kind of when a liberal and a Frederick Douglass Republican and a white supremacist walk into a CPAC panel, and it kind of devolved a little bit from there. The title of the panel was called Trump the Race Card, Are You Sick and Tired of Being Called a Racist? And I think within the title itself was a little bit of an indication of what was going to come. But honestly, while I was appalled by what Mr. Terry had to say, I was sitting immediately behind him, and in some of the clips you kind of hear my reaction about his slavery comment that we black Americans should be grateful for food and shelter given by our slave masters. But I actually took more umbrage with the presenter, K. Carl Smith.
Who was African American?
He is African American, and I was very unnerved why he didn't seem to be bothered by Mr. Terry's segregationist statement. So that I had more problem with the presenter than I did with the actual white segregationist.
Wow. His argument, and from what I was able to read of it, and I read a fair amount of the text of what was released, was basically that the Republican Party had been the party that ended slavery. The Republican Party had been the party that pushed through the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the party of Lincoln, et cetera, et cetera. And so therefore, African Americans should, get in tight with the Republican Party, or words to that effect. And somehow he missed that thing where Nixon did the whole Southern strategy thing, or how Ronald Reagan's first speech after he was nominated to be president of the United States was done in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where 3 civil rights workers were murdered, and it was a speech pretty much exclusively dedicated to, quote, states' rights. Everybody in the South knew what Ronald Reagan was talking about.
Here's the real problem that I found with this CPAC panel. Mr. Smith, the presenter, was telling a room full of interested persons. I can't say what these people's racial attitudes were. I'm not going to ascribe racism to an entire faction of political philosophy, but I will say this. These people came for answers, and this man was ill-equipping them to deal with any questions or any accusations that they may encounter dealing with racism. I'm almost going to quote him here, where he said, as long as you tell people, other black people, if you're a white person, that you are a Frederick Douglass Republican, you cannot be called a racist, because Frederick Douglass himself, you can't out-victimize Douglass. And that's a farce. I mean, it's just a disingenuous statement.
It's like, here's a magic wand that makes you not a racist anymore.
And that's kind of what he was selling. And I was very disappointed because, again, the room was packed. It was a lot of people there, I think, genuinely either not wanting to be called a racist anymore, or honestly wanting to have some sort of answer about how to deal with their feelings, or their feelings towards certain policies, or even their feelings towards certain groups of people. But as I mentioned to some of the people that I spoke with outside of the panel, I would not recommend that you approach a black person and tell them that you're a Frederick Douglass Republican, just because at minimum you're going to get laughed at. Like it comes down to a simple, and I don't mean to quote Jay-Z here, but we don't believe you. You need more people, literally.
Yeah. We had Matthew Heimbach. He's the white student union he created at Towson University. And we had him on the show last night. Here's what he had to say. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. You were at the discussion with Mr. Terry. What are your thoughts on that remark that basically I mean, slavery was a holocaust for African Americans in this country for hundreds of years.
Well, I don't think anyone here is going to defend slavery, and I'm certainly not. And the thing that Mr. Terry was doing was really we're trying to comment, and it's kind of very interesting that Think Progress is focusing on one part of the discussion instead of really looking at what the panel was about. You know, what the panel was about was talking about whether Republicans, especially Tea Party Republicans, should reach out to the minority community, and whether that's a good idea. So, I mean, really the entire focus of the panel, and I think what we should focus on, you know, looking at Ann Coulter's speech, looking at the comments made by Donald Trump, is this idea on whether minority outreach is a good idea or whether the Republican Party, to be able to win elections, should really be looking towards its base, which, you know, is...
Yeah, its base being increasingly white racists, it seems. You know, so what are your thoughts on what Matthew had to say, and not specifically necessarily to him, but, you know, to that sentiment within the Republican Party?
Tom, what I think people are missing is, well, number one, the entire video of that panel has not yet quite been released. We only are seeing little 2.5-minute segments of Mr. Terry's comments exclusively and Mr. Smith's reaction to him. But as you notice, he stood up, Terry did, and was perhaps almost expecting a reaction for what he said. And he did get a little bit of reaction. But what everyone has not yet seen is the reaction that I actually got when I stood up to ask a question about why is it that when we hear racist talk, racist ads, and I gave the example of Pete Hoekstra's very racist ad, anti-Asian ad that was ran in the Michigan Senate campaign this past election season. And I said, how come we don't hear the entire right repudiating these comments? And I was booed, I was screamed at, I was yelled at, I was, as many reports say, I was shouted down, and that's very accurate. So I think what is very telling is that Terry was tolerated, the segregation talk was tolerated, but the questioning of not necessarily are conservatives racist, but why is there no condemnation for this racist talk? That was booed, and that says a lot.
Yeah, and in my opinion, what it says is that that party has been using racism as a political tool for a lot of years, and they intend to continue it.
That's right.
Just my personal opinion. Kim Brown, Kim, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Great.